let's be real for a second. Have you ever tried to teach something really important, like fairness or honesty, and found yourself just, laying down the law, listing rules? What if there was a better way? Well, today we're diving into this incredible method for exploring complex ideas, not by handing out answers, but by learning how to ask way, way better questions.
All right, so here's our roadmap for this journey. First, we'll tackle why just talking about right and wrong can be so tricky. Then we'll introduce the community of inquiry and really get into how it works. We're going to put it to the test with a classic dilemma about fairness, and then we'll wrap it all up by looking at why this skill of thinking together is such a game changer.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a problem that pretty much everyone, whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a manager, has bumped into at some point.
It's a real head-scratcher, isn't it? I mean, just telling someone, hey, be fair, doesn't actually give them the tools to figure out what fairness looks like when things get messy and complicated. It doesn't build that muscle for deep thinking. So how do we get past the surface level?
You can kind of think of it like there are two roads you can take. The old school path is very top-down. Here are the rules, this is what you need to do. But there's another way, a much more collaborative approach that's all about the why. Instead of just giving answers, it sparks a real conversation. And that is exactly where our big idea comes into play.
So how do we actually create that better way of learning? Well, the solution is a framework called the community of inquiry. And the core idea here is just beautifully simple. It's not about a teacher standing at the front of the room lecturing. Nope, it's about a group of people coming together to form a community to figure things out together. The whole point isn't to find the one right answer, but to arrive at these shared insights that everyone in the group had a hand in building.
So what's the secret sauce that makes this work? Well, the ingredients are pretty straightforward. It's collaborative, so everyone is learning from each other. It's dialogic, which is really just a fancy way of saying it's all about conversation and asking questions. And this is so important, the teacher takes a step back. They become a facilitator whose job is to create a safe, respectful space where a shared understanding can actually grow.
Okay, so that's the big picture, the what. But how does this actually look in practice? What are the ground rules that make this kind of deep, meaningful conversation even possible?
It's not a free-for-all. There's actually a really clear structure to it. You always start with a stimulus. It could be a story, a photo, maybe a real-life problem. That's what gets the questions flowing from the group. Then, you lay down the ground rules, get the dialogue going, and use good questions to push everyone to think a little deeper. And finally, the group comes together to summarize what they figured out and reflect on the whole process.
Now these norms, this is where the magic really is. They create that safe space you absolutely need for genuine curiosity. And that rule to disagree respectfully, that is huge. It teaches us that arguing about ideas isn't a bad thing at all. In fact, it's the engine of real understanding, as long as everyone feels respected while doing it.
And this means the leader's role completely changes. They're no longer the expert, the sage on the stage with all the answers. Instead, they become the guardian of the conversation, asking questions, encouraging everyone to speak up, and making sure that space stays safe and respectful for absolutely everyone.
Okay, that's enough theory for now. Let's see how this whole thing plays out with a real, concrete example that will make it all click.
So I want you to imagine a classroom. We're going to look at a super simple scenario that actually brings up some really complex questions about what it even means to be fair. So here's the situation. You've got student A who studies really hard for their grades, and then you've got student B who just copies their answers and gets the exact same good grades. Now, our first gut reaction is, whoa, that's not fair. But in a community of inquiry, the conversation doesn't stop there. That's actually where it begins. And suddenly, the group generates a question like this one. A huge, powerful, open-ended question. And just like that, you're not just talking about cheating anymore. You're questioning the very meaning of fairness itself. I mean, both students got an equal outcome, right? A good grade. But was it fair? This is what pushes the group to think so much more deeply. And through that conversation, the group might start to build a shared insight. Something like this. They work together to create a more sophisticated understanding. They realize, oh, fairness isn't just about everyone getting the same piece of the pie. It's about what's just, what's deserved. And that is a much more powerful idea, an idea they built themselves.
Okay, so let's pull the camera back for a minute. Why go through all this trouble? What's the big picture takeaway from this whole approach?
This is probably the single most important thing to remember. If you're going into this looking for a simple black and white answer, you've already missed the point. The real value here isn't in the destination, it's all about the journey of thinking together.
I mean, just look at what that journey built. These aren't just skills for our classroom, these are skills for life. They're the building blocks for being a good citizen, for having empathy. Ultimately, this whole process builds our capacity to think and to reason together. It's about building the muscle, not just memorizing the moves.
So if there's one big idea to walk away with, it's this. Focus on building the ability to think, reason, and talk through tough stuff together.
And that leaves us with one final question for you to think about. Whether it's at your job, at home with your family, or just with friends, what's one conversation in your life that might totally transform if you just shifted from giving answers to asking more and better questions?